here we are. So now we're on stage part 2. So part 1, in theory, took us through the Civil War, except that the day before the midterm took us on agriculture through 1900. And then this part of the course, which is from now to the next midterm, which is April 4th, is essentially is post-bellum, so post-Civil War, and through the 1930s and the New Deal. I don't think I'm doing the war. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's just through the New Deal. We're going to hit some of the same themes again. So for instance, today we're going to talk about railroads. So we talked about transportation in the antebellum part of the course. We're going to talk about transportation again today. We talked about the beginnings of industrialization in the first part. We're going to talk about the mid-century, well, mid-19th century part today, and a little bit about labor. What's coming up on Thursday? Thursday, banking. Oh, yes, banking. So on Thursday, we'll talk about banking and finance. So you see how these same themes are coming up. And the themes that hopefully you're catching that these themes are by and large either about economic growth. So they're either about changes in K over L or T over L or L over P, or they're about changes in total factor productivity, the A in that production function. Or some of them are about the inequities that in the United States come along with economic growth. So that's sort of the overall overarching context. In section for this week, the section exercise, you're working with data from historical statistics. That's also going to be the focus of problem set 2, which I'll be writing in the next 24 hours and posting online and bringing hard copies on Thursday. We want you to get some experience doing that because you'll want to be able to work with some of that data for your term papers, which are due sometime later in the semester. And the other piece that you have in the section exercise is to review study strategies, right? Okay, good. So the other thing that you're doing in the section exercise this week is in groups talking about what your study strategies were for the midterm, whether you felt like that worked out pretty well or not, and getting some ideas from your classmates about various ways that you might or might not want to change how you approach the midterms. One suggestion that I had, and I know I've been teaching this class for a really long time, and I still come up with new ideas every semester, which I guess surprises me if no one else. So one idea that I had, and I ran it by one person, and then I ran it by a second person and said, oh, that would have been a really good idea, so now I'll share it with all of you, which was one thing that I think might be helpful is before the exam is to make 2 grids, 2 tables. And if you do this on Excel, it would just be a sort from one to the other. The first one would have 2 columns, and in the first column you would have the various historical events, and in the second column you'd have the economic concepts. So you make a list of what are the historical things that we've looked at starting from the first day, and next to each thing you have what's the economic concept, right? So is that on opportunity cost? Is it about total factor productivity? Today we're going to do externalities. So what's the economic concept that's illustrated with that historical concept? And then the second list is just basically a sort of that, is to start with the historical concepts and to see what are the historical things we've looked at that illustrate those concepts. Those paired IDs, which I know tend to be the bugaboo of the exam, those paired IDs are about seeing what's the common economic concept that joins these 2 historical events that might have been presented in completely different lectures. And so I think making those 2 grids might be a study strategy that might prove useful. So that's my suggestion. And you can throw that in the mix as you have a section and talk about what study strategies you use. You can throw that one in the mix as well when you're making a list of things you might try and things that you might continue to do that worked well. Do y'all have any questions before we dive in? Okey doke. Hello. Hand up. So one leftover, and then railroads, industrialization, and labor. The leftover, from what I didn't get to before the midterm, was when we were talking about agriculture, I completely forgot to talk about land policy and what made it really easy for people to expand into the western states, and that was the Homestead Act. Now, the Homestead Act is passed in 1862. 1862 is in the midst of what? Civil War. So what's important about that date is this is when the South has seceded from the Union, which means that the Southern representatives and senators are no longer in Congress. They've said, people in South Carolina said, we don't want to be part of the United States anymore, so they took their state and left the United States for 4 years. Which meant they had no representatives in Washington, D.C. And that meant the folks who were left in Washington, D.C. still got to vote, and they got to vote without the Southerners being there to block things. So one of the things that had been blocked leading up to the 1860s was the Homestead Act. Under the Homestead Act, what happens is people are able to go and take claim to land that had been federal land without having to pay for it. So it's basically a way of getting free land. So you say, oh, I want the quarter section of the 16th section of Township 221 in this state, and you plant your claim there, and then you work the land. You can't just, it's not like signing up for classes. You can't just go and grab the class so no one else can have it and then drop it at the end of week 5. Just saying. If you claim some land under the Homestead Act, you had to work the land. So if you lived on and worked the land, then after a certain number of years, depending upon what time period we're looking at or what state we're looking at, then you got a deed to the land. The land was yours and indeed yours. So this Homestead Act, which had been opposed by the Southern Democrats who didn't want to see the expansion of other types of farming, particularly family farming. They wanted to have the land for the expansion of cotton, slave-based cotton plantations, allowed for a lot of migration west, the establishment of lots of farms. When we looked at those pictures that showed the expansion of farmland after 1860, so the pictures, I'm not going to re-show them, I didn't reload them, but the ones from last week that had the increase in the amount of farm acreage in that later period, where are these people, how are these people getting there? They're moving west and claiming these lands through the Homestead Act. There's various revisions. They start out with a maximum of 160 acres per person or 320 acres for a married couple. There's various revisions. In 1909, they doubled the acreage, so then you can get a full section of 640 acres. One estimate I found was that the total that had been granted by 1934, there had been 1.6 million homesteads, including my grandparents in South Dakota outside of here, and 270 million acres, or 10% of all the U.S. land, was given to farmers to farm. This YouTube, I don't have time to watch the whole thing. Oh, and I didn't pre-sign in, so we'll see if my sign-in is still left over from last time. Let's see what happens. It's probably going to ask me to log in. Go ahead. It's supposed to remember your login for a certain amount of time. I guess not that long. Oops. I got it. No, you're not going to see my passphrase, are you? There, it's thinking. What? You're already logged in. The internet should await you. It's good. It should. Yes, it should. I know. All right. So, whoops. Go back to the PowerPoint. Click it again. YouTube. Now, this is why, of course, they won't let you see the slides online any longer because I keep putting these YouTubes in. So, oh, got to add. Is there a skip ad thing? Skip ad. Got it. What would I do without you? Okay. And so, this is just kind of fun. We're not going to watch the whole 4-minute clip, but this is from the movie Far and Away, so you will see Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise in here. And it's a depiction of the Oklahoma land rush. So this is, they have a time when they open up the land and say, okay, now what had the Oklahoma land been, right, before 1890? It was Indian territory. So once again, we had removal to the Oklahoma territory. Then we have a reclaiming. That's Nicole Kidman. I really don't think women dressed in nice clean dresses like that during this thing. But so the land is no longer Indian land, and now it's available for folks to settle, to make state claims. And there's a moment, right, when the Oklahoma land rush starts, when people are able to go and find their claim. The land has been pre-surveyed. So you're going to see this scene, depending on how long I let this go. The land has been pre-surveyed, and so there's already flags on each of the quarter sections that say which quarter section this is. Then there's, of course, the Tom Cruise macho part. What can I say? So they depict the chaos. I don't know how long it takes to get to. Not a big Tom Cruise fan, so I can't say much about Tom Cruise. The bowling ball is also an interesting aspect today, but ooh. Ouch. So, right, so some are on horseback, some have their wagons with them. Obviously, if you're just on horseback, you're going to get there faster. But if you have your wagon, you've got your stuff as well, and your family. Ouch. Cool bike, huh? Full makeup, perfectly pressed dress, hair done. That part's a little weird. Now, you see that flags they're carrying? Those are the flags that they're going to take and put in to claim their stake. I don't know, the Tom Cruise part we could skip, but I don't know where the part is that I really want to show you. It's kind of fun. How flat is that land? Flat, right? So that's land that's going to be really good for those big team horses and pulling across that machinery that needs relatively flat land. So, you know, there's slight hills and dales, but we don't have, this is not Grizzly Peak here. And we have Tom Cruise again. I know, I feel bad for the horses. Yeah, they keep showing him because he's the star of the movie. I don't know anything else about this movie. I saw this at a teaching conference I went to. So here these people found the land that they're going to claim. And there's coming up on this great scene where there's this, oh, watch this couple, I love this part. They cheated. So they went ahead of the line. Did you hear the Irish accent? Pretend you're out of breath. So the white flag was the one that had been there put before by the surveyors. They claimed that land. What was really cool about that land? What was at the edge of it? Water, exactly. So they claimed that land because it's right there with water. Yeah. I don't know. So, Sucheta, right? No. Sharada. Who's Sucheta? I don't know. Okay, she's your friend. Sharada. Could they go out and check the land out before the opening of the land rush? I don't know. You have this, I don't know. So, all right, so that was fun. That was our entertainment for the day. Let's see. Back. Okay, now let me turn the lights back on so I can see what I'm doing. The movement into this land cheaply is important because it means that, first off, the opportunity cost of being a laborer in the Northeast now has gone up, right? So because the land is free, other than your labor, it means that the production in the Northeast is having a more difficult time getting workers because the workers people can go and move into farming. Are the unskilled laborers who are coming from Ireland going to pack up and move out and establish homesteads and become farmers? The movie kind of portrayed that as happening, but the other evidence we looked at earlier in the semester in terms of where people, the plurality of people were from in terms of their ancestry, still may look like much of the Midwest is settled by German Scandinavian migrants. So the other piece that's important in terms of this cheap land is migration patterns. So remember that, and as you'll see next week, the migration pattern switches. Starting around 1850, we get the beginning of the waves of German migrants. We're going to get a big wave of migrants in the 1880s and the 1890s. You'll see that next week when Professor Such, who's here today, is going to talk about immigration policy. And you get a lot of these migrants coming in who are coming in because of the cheap land. So the cheap land really is that make it a push or a pull? Pull factor. So it's really pulling people in. Okay. All right. The other thing I want to remind you of, because it's going to come back today, is the picture I showed you at the very end last Tuesday, which is the farmers' terms of trade. That's the ratio of the price of agricultural goods to the price of non-agricultural goods. So the context I hadn't shown you, we've got the bowling ball here on the bottom of the string. So we're going to have the string moving back and forth through the right-hand side of the slide through the whole period. I told Patrick I thought it was an ad for Albany Gold. Okay, it's in the context of consumer prices generally coming down. So consumer prices are falling, 1875 to 1895. They sort of hit the bottom here, 1895, and then bump along at that level for a decade or more. So this decline in the prices that farmers are receiving, so the trend line, the blue line there is the trend line. This overall decline in the prices that farmers are receiving relative to the prices they're paying, so that's essentially what you get with this terms of trade, is in the context of prices falling generally. So it means is ag prices are falling much more rapidly than non-agricultural prices. So since the ratio is going down, but in the context of everything going down, ag prices are falling, and they're falling much more rapidly than non-ag prices. Here. How much more expensive was a hammer in the Midwest than it was in the East? I don't know. Good question. How different were the price levels in the Midwest versus the East? I don't know. I wonder if I could find out. I don't know if I can find out the answer to that question. I know a question I thought you were going to ask, which I could have answered, which was, how did the price of, for instance, a hammer compare with income then versus now? And the way that I would have answered that question is by going to a website, which you might as well know about, and that, I'm not going to go to it. Don't worry. Not to worry. That website is called Measuring Worth. All one word. Oops. I don't know, com, org. Do you know? No. I think it's .org. It's either .org or .com. One of the two. Try one and then try the other. And measuringworth.com or measuringworth.org, whichever one it is a website that was put together by economic historians. And you go in and you put in prices for anything. So you say how much something that cost $1 in 1870, how much would that cost today? And you can see what happens. You can do it relative to what's happened to consumer prices generally, or relative as a share of income in 1870 versus as a share of income today. And there's a third way. I forget what the third way is as well. So it's a pretty cool website. But that's not the question that you had, Peter, but I thought that's where we were going. All right. Once all those folks got out there with their horses and buggies to claim that land, they were going out there in order to farm. Of course, some of the farming they're doing is to sustain the family. My cousin this weekend posted this thing that she found online, which I think my mom actually was the one that had typed up and put online initially, but my mom's gone, so who knows. And it's a letter from my great-grandmother, who was born in 1850 and died in 1933. And she, as a young girl, their family moved to Iowa. They moved from Ohio to Iowa because her uncle had moved to Iowa and had told them about the fabulous farmland in Iowa. And so she and her 13 brothers and sisters and her parents moved, big farm families, right, moved to Iowa and established a farm in Iowa. And she describes in this letter the first years when they moved there, like these folks, right? There's no houses there. It's not like you're moving out and moving into a house. So the first thing you've got to do is figure out some shelter, and then you've got to start figuring out the land. She talks about how the land was just covered with snakes, that everywhere you looked was snakes, and sometimes the rattlers would get into the house, but generally they stayed outside. Initially what you're doing is you're planting food for the family. So she talks about planting turnips and corn and a few other crops and having some basic food crops for the family until you can get enough food for the family, and then you start working on planting food for market. But if you're going to plant food for market, you need some way of getting the food to market, right? And so now we're back to transportation. So we're going to look at railroads today, and we're going to look at railroads both in terms of transporting goods to market and also in terms of transporting people to places. In the pre-Civil War period, so this is a map from 1857 that shows you how long it takes to get from New York to various places. That line that's going back and forth is going to drive me batty. And it took, as we saw in a previous slide, it took only now 3 days, whatever am I at, 3 days to get to Chicago, not bad. But it still was taking 6 weeks to get all the way out here to California, and everybody knows this is the best place to be. So it's still taking 6 weeks to get all the way across the country. The California Gold Rush starts when? 1848. So this is almost a decade after the beginning of the California Gold Rush. California has become a state. The whole territory, Texas, and basically everything west of the Louisiana Purchase, so from Texas up here through Utah, New Mexico, Idaho, all this area had become part of the United States in the 1840s, but still it was taking 6 weeks basically to get all the way out through that territory. In the 1860, again on the eve of the Civil War, the railroad lines, this is showing the east coast of the country. Most of the you don't have to know where every one of these lines are, but you want to know that the preponderance of them are here in New England, and there are relatively few railroad lines down here in the south. We've talked about that before. The large number of navigable rivers in the south meant that there was less incentive to do the investment to build the rivers. Remember, there also were a lot of canals up in this area that were also being used to transport goods to market. Those canals, though, a canal, they don't dig a ditch and put water in it to make a canal. A canal goes from a natural waterway. Well, sometimes they do, but a canal is also a natural waterway that they're trying to figure out ways to bridge the falls so that the boats don't get broken up over the falls. So we've got some major rivers out here, right? We've got the Missouri and the St. Joseph River and all these other rivers, but this part of the country, the Midwest where people are now settling, isn't filled with the amount of rivers that you see in the East Coast. It doesn't have the large number of, if we work on it, it could be a navigable river that you see in the east. And so there's a need for transportation system. It's not as feasible to extend this whole canal system out here, and the canal system goes kind of slow. So what do we get? We're going to get railroads. I dug up a couple of pictures. If you haven't been to the Railroad Museum in Sacramento, go. It's fun. If you have a cousin or a little brother or sister, take them. So you can take Amtrak from Berkeley, and you get off the Amtrak train in Sacramento, and it's just right across the parking lot. It's a perfect day trip when the family's here. You don't have any homework, so this is like the beginning of the semester after graduation. And it's really fun. So can you see what that word is there? Stanford, right. So Stanford's going to be part of our story of the construction of the railroads. But this is a picture of one of the early steam engines from the railroads in the late 1800s. And this is a picture of a refrigerated car. So one of the developments they have in the late 19th century are refrigerated boxcars. That's important because until you have refrigerated boxcars, you can't transport. You know, that's not cloth hanging there. That's meat. Exactly. That's meat. If you don't have refrigerated boxcars, you can't transport this meat from one place to another because you just don't want to know. Right? It just gets kind of grody if you're hanging it in a boxcar that otherwise gets pretty hot. So the refrigerated boxcars allow for the transportation of many more types of goods, particularly meat, than just your plain old everyday boxcar or open car that could take the wheat or the corn. Oh, another movie. I don't have a clip of it. East of Eden, I think, is a movie where there's a whole long thing about trying to develop a boxcar that would transport lettuce, which was a big crop down in the Salinas area. And this boxcar has ice on either end. So if you surround your lettuce with ice and your ice melts, what do you have? Yeah. You have gross, you don't have lettuce anymore, right? You have gross, green, slimy stuff. So these were really good for transporting sides of beef, not so good for transporting heads of lettuce. Later developments get us heads of lettuce. All right, what are we going to get? We're going to get a boom in railroad construction. Table 1 in the handout for today shows you the number of miles. There's 3 waves of construction, mid-1860s to mid-1870s, 1879 to 1883, 1886 to 1892. Each of those 3 waves of construction ends with a financial crisis. That's not simply coincidental. So they're ending with financial crisis because the construction of the railroads there's a lot of money being borrowed to build all these railroad lines. Now, you might think railroad lines, how many could there possibly be? A lot of these railroad lines are local railroad lines. They're regional or even local lines. A lot of them are going, some of them are going just a few miles to get to factories or to get to grain mills. And there are regional lines, and then eventually, of course, we get the Transcontinental Railroad. But there are lots of different railroad companies initially that are all building all sorts of railroad lines. Now, one of the problems initially when all of this construction is going on, the initial construction, is that there's no standard gauge. The gauge is, I'm not the artist in the family, Jimmy is. So here's your railroad track. That's your railroad track, and on your railroad track, we're going to get the railroad engine. How's that? It's pretty bad, huh? Okay, and the gauge is how far apart are those 2 railroad lines, or the 2 rails. So the gauge refers to how far apart are the rails. If you don't have a common gauge, right, it's not like you're walking along and you either have to walk along with your feet this far apart or with your feet this far apart or with your feet this far apart. We're talking about a railroad engine. And a railroad engine, most railroad engines, their wheels are so far apart, and the wheels are a certain distance apart to go with the gauge of the rail line that they're on. And when there's not one common gauge, so if there's some places where it's 4 foot 6 inches apart, in some places it's 5 feet apart, in some places it's 5 foot 8 apart, in some places it's 6 feet apart, if you've got a steam engine that's built for a 4 foot 6 inch gauge, it's going to be running on one wheel if it's on a 6 foot gauge, right? Can't work. So the absence of a standard gauge is a problem for having a railroad system that does more than just those local lines to factories or grain elevators. In 1870, there was a federal bill that required a standard gauge. I don't know, Peter. What was the standard gauge? Oh, good. Okay. I just realized I didn't write down what the standard gauge was. I think it's 5 foot 6. Is it 5 foot 6? Close enough. All right. 5.5 feet or so. And then once there's a standard gauge, then those railroad lines that had been built with a different gauge, they either would abandon that line or they would put in a 3rd rail that would make it the right gauge. So sometimes in the old parts of the country, sometimes you can find abandoned railroad lines and there'll be 3 rails there because the first 2 rails that had been installed were either too far apart or too close together relative to the standard gauge. And then they went back and did an adjustment by installing a 3rd line. A 3rd rail. But there's a lot of borrowed money to do this, and the heavy borrowing puts some stress on the credit markets, and so these financial